afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here today. This is our first virtual Mental Health Monday of the 2025-2026 season. And so we're so excited to have you all. So Virtual Mental Health Monday, we started it in May of 2020. And it's a series where we explore health and wellness through a creative and holistic lens. I'm Kimberly Kirkland, and I'm with UAB Arts and Medicine. Our mission is to enhance health and wellness in healthcare and community settings through arts and creative expression. Also, before we begin, I would like to say to please note that this is being recorded. So, yes, you can keep your cameras off if you'd like to not be on screen. Also, please feel free to put in our chat, if you want to just say a hello, maybe where you're Zooming from, and, your particular interest or connection with this topic. Also, at the end, after we've had both of our speakers present, we will have opportunity for Q&A. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we will get to those toward the end. So today, we have with us award-winning neuroscientist Dr. Lindsay Smith and pioneering yoga therapist Kim Richardson to discuss how sound and yoga impact the nervous system and promote holistic wellness. Combining scientific expertise with inclusive, trauma-informed practices, they will share unique perspectives on healing, resilience, and community connection. They will combine brain science and practical approaches to promote personal and collective growth. So at this point, I will turn it over to Kim Richardson, and she will kick us off. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly, and hello, good afternoon to everyone signing in from all over the state and it looks like possibly even the country. My name again is Kimberly Richardson, and I am a certified yoga therapist. I'm also a sound and vibrational practitioner, as well as work in lots of other wellness modalities. Most of all, I'm really proud to be an artist in residence with UAB's Arts and Medicine team. So I offer yoga therapy in a number of clinical settings. Today, and you see my background here, I'm at Children's of Alabama, where I spend 2 days rotating through the behavioral health unit. I also work with UAB's O'Neal Comprehensive Cancer Center, as well as the Birmingham VA and other spaces. And so I'm really glad to be able to engage in this conversation today to talk about all of those connections between the nervous system, yoga, mindfulness, and sound in particularly, and how that works on our nervous system and how sound in particularly can affect the brain. And so if we could go ahead and start the slides, I'm going to dive right into it so that we don't lose a lot of time, but please feel free to put the questions in the chat. And if you could, there we go. Thank you so much. And let me make this a little bigger. So what I want to do is start today by jumping right into the nervous system. And hopefully we're all familiar with our nervous system. There's a lot that's going on in the world right now that keeps our nervous systems dysregulated, triggered, activated. We know we have lots of language, but we don't necessarily take a lot of time spending talking about what our nervous system really is. And so there's different parts to our nervous system, because a lot of times when we talk about the nervous system, we talk about it from the perspective of just having a nervous system. But there are actually different parts that we learn about, particularly through the practice of yoga and other modalities. And so when we talk about the nervous system, we have our central nervous system, which is comprised mainly of the brain and the spinal cord, sort of the central processing unit for the nervous system. But then we also have the peripheral nervous system, which are all those nerves that extend out to the nervous system and connect with the rest of the body. And this image here is basically a representation of the peripheral nervous system, which then can be subdivided into a somatic nervous system, which controls voluntary movements such as muscle contractions. And then we have the autonomic nervous system, which regulates involuntary bodily functions such as our heart rate, digestion, and sweating even. So as you can see here, the autonomic nervous system then also breaks down into two parts, which is really the part that we get into when we talk about the practice of yoga. And you may have heard these terms before. You have the sympathetic side of the nervous system and you have the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. You've also probably heard the language of fight, flight, or freeze, which is most closely associated with our sympathetic nervous system. And then you've also probably heard rest and digest, which is associated with the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. And so there's lots that we can do to activate different parts of our nervous system, particularly through things like meditation and pranayama or breath work, which are so critical elements or critical parts of how we practice and express yoga. And we can do that through our breath work in particular, especially when we lengthen our exhale. So most of us don't spend a lot of time thinking about how we're breathing, right? And a lot of times we're either holding our breath or we are breathing in a very shallow way or taking these short, shallow, fast breaths, which is more closely related with that sympathetic nervous system activation, that fight, flight, or freeze. But when we want to come into this place of more relaxation, we want to take a slower, deeper, longer breath. So right now, I want to take a minute for everyone to just pause wherever you are. If you're in a safe place, feel free to take a moment to close your eyes or to soften your gaze and just take a moment to notice your breath. So don't do anything to manage it, but just bring your attention and awareness to it. Notice its qualities. Notice if the breath feels deep or shallow. Notice if your breath feels smooth or choppy. Even notice the temperature of the breath, where if you pause long enough, you may notice that the breath feels cooler on the inhale and warmer on the exhale. So just the act of starting to stop, pause, and notice the breath, bring that awareness and attention to the breath, sends us to that parasympathetic side. And then when we begin to take a deeper breath, so begin to take a deeper breath in through the nose and a longer exhale out through the nose. So maybe try breathing in for a count of 4 and breathing out for 6. Breathe in for 4 and breathe out for 6. And just take a moment to notice if you feel a shift energetically, what that does for the nervous system, sending you over to that rest and relaxation side. From here, we're going to go ahead and advance to the next slide. Because one of the things that's really connected in terms of the nervous system is this nerve that's called the vagus nerve. And it's the 10th cranial nerve that extends from the base of the brain. It runs down along the sides of the ears, the neck, through the chest, into the belly, and extends out to other parts of the body. And it is one of the longest nerves that we have. Vagus actually translates into like traveling. And one of the things that we can do, it's very closely related to that parasympathetic activation of the nervous system. And one of the ways, or some of the ways that we can activate that vagus nerve is by things like tapping, singing, humming, even gargling, movement, anything that's stimulating that nerve that's sort of traveling or wandering all around the body. So the next thing that I want you to do is take a moment to take a breath in through the nose again. Take that long exhale out. Maybe once again, take that long exhale inhale. And on the exhale, see if you can exhale with a hum. So I'm going to demonstrate it. Breathe in and exhale with a until you run out of breath. And go ahead and do a couple of rounds of that on your own. I won't guide you through it, but just practice on your own, taking that breath in through the nose, exhaling with a hum. And sometimes in yoga, we'll use an om sound. And I want to talk about the importance of sound here because the voice is the original sound healing. Now, when we do sound baths and sound healings, there's a lot of instruments, crystal bowls, Himalayan bowls, drums, all different sorts of things. But this voice, whether it's a mother who's singing a lullaby, Om is considered to be the sound of creation, all of these different things that we have available to us, but they serve the purpose of regulating our nervous system. So I really want you to begin to be more curious about sound, even if you think about if you're a person who likes to work out or go for a walk with your headphones or your earbuds in, your iPod, I have the little wireless earbuds or the Beats headphones. Think about how what you're listening to affects your energy. Some things are more upbeat and active that are going to make you want to walk faster, run faster, work out harder, and some of those sounds are going to be relaxing. And I think Dr. Smith is going to get into sort of those connections between sound and brain waves and neurotransmitters and connections and all of those great things. So remember that we have this parasympathetic and sympathetic portions of our autonomic nervous system, and we have this vagus nerve as one of the major cranial nerves that's traveling all around the body. And there are some people, I know I have members of my family who are just naturally humming in the background. Someone that kind of nervously hums or is just always kind of singing or humming in the background. That's just how they go about their day. This is actually a form of nervous system regulation. So if you weren't aware of that, let that be a big takeaway for you today. Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. The next thing that I want to get into is it's also related to the nervous system as we explore a lot of this through our yoga practice is energy centers, or what we call the chakras. And there are many different thoughts around how many energy centers there are in the body, but for most people, we're taught that there are 7 energy centers that align with the brain and the spinal cord. This image here gives you sort of a picture of that starts from the base of the spine. They're at the bottom in red. That's considered to be the root chakra. Then just above the root chakra, that's at the base of the spine, there's the sacral chakra, which is just considered to be below the navel, below your belly button. The next chakra, the third chakra, is above the navel, sort of between the bottom of the rib cage and the belly button, and that's the solar plexus. The fourth chakra is our heart center, which is the fourth. It's in the middle. It's considered to connect the lower energy centers with the higher energy centers. And then we have the throat chakra, which is the fifth one. That's here at the center of the throat. We have the third eye chakra, which is at the center of the forehead, and the seventh and final is the crown chakra, which is at the crown of the head, extending out into the energy centers that surround us. But each one of those energy centers is considered to have a connection to a note. And as you can see from the image here, it starts with the notes, the C note, that starts at the root chakra, and then it goes up through G, and then it goes over to A and B with the third eye and the crown chakra. And you can do lots of research around these.
It looks like Kim is frozen. We'll Oh, Kim, you're back. You were frozen for
Okay,
just a
all
moment.
right.
Yay. Okay.
Okay, I don't know what you all may have missed. I know I'm coming up on time, but just know that this image here that you can do lots of research on is connected to the energy centers and the associated notes. So when we talk about making those connections between sound and the nervous system, this is just another way of expressing that. Those who practice sound healing or sound baths are probably very familiar with this, or if you've ever participated in a sound bath, just know that those lower notes are considered to be grounding, balancing, calming. Those higher notes that move up towards the crown of the head are considered to be more activating, more stimulating, and connected to different parts of the nervous system. So I'm glad to take any questions if you want to learn more about that. And each one of those is not just considered to be that one spot, but is considered to be an extension of that whole area. So for example, the heart chakra isn't just related to the heart, but it's the chest, it's the arms, all the way out to the fingertips, the back of the body as well. So just know it's that entire region of the body. The throat chakra, which is related to the G note. So an overactivated or unbalanced chakra for the throat chakra would be someone who feels difficulty speaking up or using their voice or speaking their truth. So you may just want to explore these notes to help support you if any of this resonates with you. The last thing, if we advance to the last slide, the last thing that I want to mention is that there's a lot of work around mantras and chanting in yoga. It may or may not be your thing, but it's historically, it is part of the lineage of yoga. And one of the specific mantras that I want to mention here is one that's called Kirtan Kriya. Kriya means practice. Kirtan Kriya, it comes from the Kundalini lineage, and it's 12 minutes of chanting. And the reason that I want to specifically mention this Kriya here, and you can feel free to Google it, you can go to YouTube, there are lots of examples of people practicing. But there's a ton of research that shows that if you practice 12 minutes of this chanting, this sound, and it involves chanting, which is the sound of the voice. It involves mudras or hand gestures, finger movements, and it involves visualization where you're picturing each one of those syllables. And it's essentially a chanting of 4 syllables, sa, ta, na, ma. And you're just, with each syllable, you're touching the tips of your fingers. And you do that for 12 minutes where you spend 2 minutes saying that those syllables out loud. You spend 2 minutes saying it in a whisper. You spend 4 minutes in silence, just thinking of those sounds, kind of sweeping through the brain. And then you go backwards, 2 minutes in a whisper, 2 minutes back out loud. But there is a ton of data, including data from the Alzheimer's Research Training Foundation, that shows that if you practice this 12 minutes a day, it actually grows, it prevents cognitive decline. It works against Alzheimer's and dementia. It actually grows those areas of the brain that are related and connected to memory, and has lots of other effects and outcomes as shown here on this slide. So just know that these are several things that you can research that relate to the practice of yoga, whether it's through chanting and the use of sound, whether it's through activating or supporting the energy centers that are also connected to sound with the chakras and the notes and associated, that are also connected to that breathing and the exhale and the use of sound in our breath work that can also support whether we're on that rest and digest side of the nervous system or on the sympathetic side, which is more activating. So I'm going to stop there. I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. Did we want to take questions here, or were we just going to allow Dr. Smith and then hold questions for the end?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. That was really, really interesting. Yeah, let's pause for questions. We'll go ahead and go with Dr. Smith, and then we'll bring it back and open it up for both of y'all. But again, thanks so much, Kim. All right, Dr. Lindsay Smith, turning it over to you.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kim, for that really amazing introduction, especially with the schedule that you're managing right now. So Kim brought up a lot of really, really good points. So before I point towards the brain-specific science around sound and neuroplasticity, actually, I should introduce myself first, and then we'll go into that. Okay, so my name is Dr. Lindsay Smith. I am a UAB trained neuroscientist with a specialty in synaptic electrophysiology, meaning that I actually study neuroplasticity in living brain systems. So that's what I did when I was still in academic research. I dedicated my academic research to the neuroplasticity really the degradation of it in Alzheimer's disease and how we can protect it with things like ovarian hormones. Like, what are the mechanisms there, right? So I was doing that really hardcore research in graduate school. I then left academia, and I spent several years working in a realm known as digital pathology. So many of you might not have ever heard of that term yet because it is the future of diagnostic screening tools and research. Many of these tools are not available yet in the clinic, but I still do currently to this day work as a scientific advisor for places like the Mayo Clinic, helping them build these diagnostic screening tools so that we can bring the clinical error rate and misdiagnosis rate down, right? So that we can get better and more accurate at identifying things like really tricky cancers that are often missed. Outside of that, my passion project is why I'm here today. So it's called Synaptic Harbor, and I started Synaptic Harbor, which is like a public neuroscience education program. I really want to put neuroscience in action, starting here in Birmingham, Alabama. And I want to do it in ways that are accessible to the public and really rely on stress resiliency. And I'll talk about why that's important in a minute. And the reason I call it Synaptic Harbor is because these tools that we're using really help protect the environment of the synapse, right? It's you're building environments inside of your body that build cellular resilience against stress, and that's more important than most people realize. So, back to Kim's point, I'm not touching on the energy systems or the chakra systems today. She did end there, but I do want to point out for anyone on the call that hasn't really learned about those in the past. I had a sort of non-traditional upbringing. I was a level 3 trained Reiki master by the age of 18. I grew up playing with crystal singing bowls and things like that, and I was later certified after a series of traumatic life events and kind of brought me back into this work as a real necessity, not only for myself. And then I realized I really wanted to bring to the public awareness as to how these tools work. But just for your information, the chakra systems and any of that sort of subtle energy work that people discuss, that is not fake. That is not woo-woo. If you have been paying taxes anytime between now and 1992, your taxpayer dollars have funded human biofield research. So the NIH, our largest government funding body in the US and around the world for research, actually created the term the human biofield to encompass all of these subtle energy practices in 1992. And you have been actively paying for that research. So I do feel like you should know more about that. That's going to be a later masterclass that I have closer to 2020, end of 2026, 2027. But now my main focus is really teaching about people about my core domain, which is neuroplasticity. And I use sound and sound healing techniques as a certified sound healer to facilitate teaching people. So when I say neuroplasticity, that might be a new word to some people. Basically, what that means is that our brains are not stuck. We have this lifelong ability to experience brain change, and we can actually inform that change, right? What we do, what we eat, even our thoughts change how our brains work, how they work now, and how they will work moving forward. And so I'm sure everyone's heard of the term neurons that fire together wire together. That's the Hebbian principle of neuroplasticity, and states become traits. So if you're chronically stressed, you kind of become this neurotic mess, which I personally have a lot of experience with, coming out of the graduate system and high level academic sciences, being a perfectionist myself on a trauma background. So this is kind of what led me into it. But I had a very interesting background being a neuroplasticity researcher, and I didn't really apply it to my life behaviorally until after a breast cancer diagnosis. So I was working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for decades. And it finally caught up to me. So your mind and your body are not separate. About 80% of the people on the globe today still think that that's true. That is a very old, outdated idea that still causes us a lot of problems in the clinic today with misdiagnoses and symptoms not being taken seriously. But your brain and your body are very connected. And so Kim was able to touch on one of those main connections, that cranial nerve X or the vagus nerve. And so that's one way that your brain and your body are connected. And that is responsible for rapid neural transmission. So when we're talking about neurons and wired connections in the body, we're talking about milliseconds. So things that happen very fast, right? You touch a hot stove, you pull back your hand. You see something alarming, you have a fight or flight reaction. What's also happening in your body that's less discussed, and this is kind of what I say, what we do in the shadows, because it's kind of intangible and we don't really see it, right? But what's really important is what's mediating not only those fast responses, but also the slow responses. So when I get stressed out at 12 p.m., because my boss asked me to now take my PTO time to work on an extra project, right? How is that going to affect my late night eating behavior? And how does that affect my stress response, right? So we now know that within the context, right, we have our neurons, but they don't exist in an ecosystem by themselves. They have other players around them. And so, what's responsible for that long range communication and long term communication? What's responsible for that is Mother Nature actually was very brilliant and built in our original wireless communication system. And so that occurs through our hormones or our neuroendocrine system. So, this is how our nerves interact without wires with the rest of our body. And so let me give you an example of that that's very relatable. And so, like, if you get stressed out, for some instance, and the reason I focus on stress is because it's so important. When you get stressed out, yes, you do have your neural reactions, but you also have the hormone components of that. You have this cascade of both neural and hormone reactions. And one of the most critical ones that we've identified is called the HPA axis. It's a hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. You do not have to remember that. You're not getting quizzed. I just want you to know about it. And so that HPA axis is the end product of that is when we have this fear response. And in modern society, it's totally hijacked in all the wrong ways. And so when we have that fear response, whether it's an email or an actual bear standing in front of us, right? Or if we're even thinking about the email from our boss or the bear standing in front of us, the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's imagined and something that's real, right? So when we have that fear response, our brains and our bodies are connected, and that HPA axis is responsible for getting and sending out cortisol to the rest of our body, including our brain, to mobilize energy stores and say, hey, get away from that, right? It's dangerous, remove yourself. And so when we get stressed chronically, like in short terms, that's fine. A little bit of stress actually helps us focus, right? If someone's coming at you at the wrong side of the highway and you have to make a quick turn, you don't have time to sit there and like think about the puzzle of how the road is constructed. Your body will automatically try and get you out of the way, right? So like short term, it increases our attention, it makes us really fast, like fast reaction time, but chronic stress, which the majority of Americans experience, leads to chronic disease. And the connection piece there is inflammation. So we now know that we have this historic breakthrough, this historic convergence of information in the data, that every major chronic disease that we know of, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, they all have chronic inflammation as one of their primary mediators, right? And chronic stress drives chronic inflammation through chronic cortisol release by activating this HPA axis. Your vagus nerve is critical, right? Your vagus nerve becomes dysregulated in this soup of dysregulated hormones, right? And so when we did that breathing exercise earlier, we went from being sort of up here and thinking and learning back down into our bodies. And that's a very important practice. And people don't realize like how much we actually have to do this because resilience is not a preset, it really is a practice. And the reason why is because our brains are not constructed for resilience, right? They are set up to scan our environment, look for danger, and we have what is called a negativity bias. So our brains have a negativity bias, meaning we will scan our environments even if there is no danger. And when we kind of start going to bed at night or you wake up at 2 a.m., that's a cortisol response, by the way. We can talk more about that later. But you wake up at 2 a.m. or you're going to bed at night and your head's racing and you're like, oh my God, like the world's falling. Like that's actively releasing cortisol in your body and it is messing up your homeostatic signals, right? Over time, what this does is it leads to an effect called, now that we're talking about homeostasis, it leads to an effect called allostatic load. And so what allostatic load is, it's that wear and tear that happens, that mechanical wear and tear on all the cells in your body, because when you mobilize a stress response, everything, all of that, those energy sources that were supposed to repair cells, that were supposed to maintain cells, that were supposed to allow cells to grow, right? Like Kim was talking earlier about the hippocampus, and we do see that. People that actively practice what sound baths, yoga, Tai Chi, breathing exercises, all of those are considered well-being boosters. That's the scientific term for it. It's a well-being booster, and you can look it up in the literature. These are all shown to regulate your HPA axis. They increase your attention, they increase your focus, and they decrease your fatigue. Why is that? The reason why is because you are not dumping your fuel sources into mobilizing yourself into a fight or flight situation. Instead, you're bringing your body back down and you're consciously becoming aware and you're regulating your nervous system so that it can go do those things like grow new neurons to remember the new things that you're learning and to keep your body and your organs functioning correctly and to prevent you from developing insulin resistance because you're so stressed all the time, your body no longer knows how to work with what you eat, right? That's all downstream of a chronic HPA activation. And so there's, and we go into our doctors and our doctors never ask us about stress, right? They're never like, how stressed are you? And in fact, our eating habits, our sleeping habits, how we relate to other people, all of that is on this background of how regulated is our nervous system. And so because we have this sort of built-in negativity bias, we do have to actively train our brains. And the good news is you're not stuck. You're not stuck. Like if you took a little test when you were a teenager or an IQ test, it doesn't matter. Like we now know that IQ tests are not a good indication of what you know, right? That's not a good measure of intelligence. There's multiple types of intelligence, including emotional intelligence, which I would argue should be further up the list than most people consider it. But outside of the IQ testing, right? Like you've learned things about yourself over time. You have cognitive filters about things that you believe about yourself, right? I can't do this, or I always fail in this situation, or yada, 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 yada. That's your brain's negativity bias. You have learned to think that about yourself, right? And it's probably holding you back in a lot of situations. It's also probably chronically stressing you out to think that you're incapable and that you're stuck with this brain and that you can't go certain ways, right? So neuroplasticity is really coming to the forefront. So when I was still in graduate school, I couldn't even mention the word without people going, what are you talking about? Right. And now I go on social media and every TikTok influencer in the world is like BDNF, right? You probably all heard of BDNF by now. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It is one of many compounds that can be involved in neurogenesis, so the formation of new neurons in the brain. I would highly, highly caution you to listen to anyone that says BDNF in all situations is great. Just listen to me, take my supplement. Don't do that. That's chasing a waterfall, right? There are hundreds of types of neuroplasticity, right? And if BDNF causes the establishment and helps the establishment of new memories, if your BDNF is up artificially and you end up in a traumatic situation, well, guess what? You're going to train your brain even more in that traumatic situation because when it comes to us, what's relevant neuroplasticity to you, to me, to our daily behaviors is it adaptive or is it maladaptive? You do not need to know about BDNF. You don't need to know about the voltage dependent magnesium block on an NMDA receptor. Like none of that matters to you, right? Like, and if someone tells you that it does matter, you know they're full of shit, right? So now we're past the chasing waterfalls part, right? We now understand that there are things that happen in the shadows that are intangible to our human eyes. We cannot see them without a microscope, right? We cannot see them and they're happening, right? We're getting all this cortisol release. It's taking away energy from all the repair processes in our body. And this is why we have to come back to stress resiliency as a practice. And the thing is, pro athletes do this, right? Everyone's always like, how can I increase my performance, right? How can I induce neuroplasticity? Well, pro athletes are already doing this, right? Exercise is one way. Don't overdo it. That's bad. That does the opposite. But when I'm talking about adaptive neuroplasticity, I'm talking about what are the small things over time that add up by the time that you're 80 that help prevent things like dementia. And as Kim pointed to earlier, doing sound baths and doing yoga have been statistically proven to help lower the probability that you will get Alzheimer's disease. It can even help lengthen the amount of time before, even if you do have dementia, if you start exercising and eating right, it delays the timeline before it becomes so severe that you now have all of your loved ones caregiving for you, right? So all of these lifestyle modifications are really important. I'm kind of going all over the place, I know. I think I want to point towards a couple of things. I'm going to come back to neuroplasticity, and well-being booster practice. First, I just want to point out sound in general. So sound has been used clinically for decades, right? So I'm going to pull out a little instrument here. You've probably seen these. These are tuning forks. These get used in an orthopedic setting. So sound itself moves through the human body and the various tissues at different rates. So we can hear sound, right? We can hear sound only within a limited range. I'll get back to this in a second. We can hear sound within 20 to 20,000 hertz. So limited, right? There's a lot of sound that's happening outside of our hearing range that our bodies are still picking up on, right? We have tactile receptors in our body that, maybe our ears aren't as receptive to, right? So there's all kinds of stuff going on there. And then not only that, sound is a mechanical wave. And so that sound wave energy is actually passing through your body. So if it's an air-filled space like your lungs, it's going to go a lot slower, probably hundreds of miles an hour. And when it's moving through something like bone, it's moving at thousands of miles per hour. So sound moves through the human body at anywhere from 300 to 3,000-ish miles per hour, give or take, on both ends there. And so that has a lot of implications for how we can use it. It's a wave, we can measure it, it has amplitude, it has frequency, so we can use it in the clinic. Tools like this is a tuning fork. You'll see this both in a sound healing setting as well as a clinical setting, specifically orthopedics. And so tuning forks have been used by bone doctors for years. Basically, what they do is they activate the fork, it sends out a loud frequency, and if they hear that the frequency or the sound goes down, that indicates that there's probably a small fracture or a bone break there because the sound is no longer conducting, right? You have to have the bone to conduct the sound, to keep the sound wave going. If the bone is broken, the sound wave peters out. And you can hear that using one of these. And so it seems like a rudimentary tool, but I'm sure it was a breakthrough at the time. Oh, good. I see someone keep their tuning forks by their nightstand. In a sound healing setting, you're probably going to see one modified like this. So here you see this one doesn't have a foot, doesn't have any end weights. This one has a foot on it and weights. And so what you can do is you can start to put that on different parts on your body to help activate that vagus nerve more so than maybe you can do along with breathing. And so these sound tools are really just that. They're tools to help you start to interact with your body, learn your own nervous system, and go from there. Um, I've kind of jumped all over the place here. I have so many talking points that I want to tell you about. Oh, clinically. Okay. Clinically, I think just so that people know, like it's not that far out there that we're using sound. Actually, for the past 20,000 years that humans have existed on the planet, and Dr. Daniel Levitin goes through that in his book. I heard there was a secret chord. But he talks about how music was often integral to medicine. If we just not just talk about sound therapy, just music in general, that was integral to medicine in the past 20,000 years of human evolution. And really in the last 200 years, we just completely took it out, right? In the last 30 years, we've started to see it come back into the clinic in various ways. One is through the use of technology, which I'll talk about in a minute. Another one is through the use of um, sound therapy, right? In the clinic, we see that when people are really stressed out, everyone is stressed out before they go into a surgery. It's impossible not to be, right? So everyone is stressed out before they go into a surgery. And we now know that if you can mitigate that stress, your recovery time is shorter and you recover much better, right? And so there's various ways that we're doing this in the clinic now that's being studied. Some people are recommending, breath work and guided meditation. Some other people are studying the use of Reiki, especially in cancer populations, right, to help regulate the nervous system. And now sound baths and tools like sound baths are now being used clinically and being studied and how they can basically boost the immune system because then we're again remember what's happening is when we're doing these nervous system regulating techniques, we're reducing the total volume of cortisol and negative sort of hormones and signaling that's happening in the body, right? So if we can mitigate that, we have less to go in the recovery process after the surgery, is essentially the idea. There's all kinds of other tools. Now there's tools upon tools. Just last year, it was either 2023 or 2024, the FDA actually approved a very specific type of adapted ultrasound, so above the human hearing range technology to kill cancer cells non-invasively. So that is now FDA approved and available at a couple of places in the US, unfortunately not widely. for the treatment of cancer. So you can kill cancer cells with certain types of sound. Now, remember, I said that was ultrasonic. It's outside of the human hearing range. So those are very specific, very pointed types of sound. You're using very specific ranges of wavelengths to get in there and kind of create a micro bubble around the cancer and then explode it, essentially, is what they're doing. But outside of that, I would not encourage someone to go to a sound bath to try and treat their stage 4 cancer. Instead, I would encourage someone in that situation to use a sound bath to treat their chronically active nervous system because you are stressed during that, right? And so if anyone ever tells you a sound bath is going to regrow your arm or cure cancer, that's just incorrect. But the regulating of your nervous system can help prevent a cancer forming environment from taking hold. Does that make sense? Right. And so, because what happens when you're having that cortisol HPA axis response is that I hate to tell you all on the call if you don't already know, but as a cancer survivor myself, it's really important for me to get the word out. Every single person on this call, every single person on the planet has and produces cancer cells continuously. Not everybody will get cancer. I know it's a scary thought, right? So, not only do we have this default negativity bias in our brain where we're constantly looking out for danger, and now it's social media and emails and constant dings, and it's just keeping us so activated and we're so stressed all the time. When we're so stressed and we don't allow our bodies to rest, that is helping to create microenvironments that help cancer cells establish, right? So it's almost like twofold. And it's coming at us from multiple directions, right? And so this is the reason why doing things like sound baths and yoga and breath work and Reiki, if you're into it, like if that's what works for you, everybody's a little bit different, right? Then like that's the reason why coming back to these as a practice is so important. I think I want to make a note on that as well. Some people don't not everyone likes all the same sounds, right? And nothing should ever be a blanket statement. I cannot say that sound baths will be helpful for all cancer patients in regulating their cortisol response. That would be a false statement, right? A more accurate statement would be find the sound systems that work for you, for your nervous system. It turns out that a lot of times, and I'm just holding up one of the sound bath instruments here that isn't a crystal bowl that most people don't recognize. This is a tongue drum. It sounds really pretty. It sounds like fairies. People really like it. It looks like a little spaceship. And it's really portable. They make these super small now, and you can put them on your desk. That is generally a nice sound to most people. Some people, you never know someone's background. They could have had a particularly traumatic experience hearing those exact sounds, and it's a no-go for their nervous system, right? So find the sounds that work for you. And so what's kind of happening in the brain, at least with these instruments, and they're called idiophonic instruments, meaning that it's just the instrument itself while it's vibrating, which is creating the sound. And these are highly engineered. They're also thousands of years old, right? These are tools that were engineered to put out very specific tones for the purposes of relaxing the human nervous system. We've always had stress. It's just amplified nowadays. And so the point with that is that we now actually have brain scan studies, right? So we can see inside the body, we can get all these other measurements, and we're just now getting around to putting people in scanners and measuring their brain waves and taking their blood and measuring their peripheral sweat responses and things like that. We're only just now getting around to that. But you don't have to be a neuroscientist to sit in a sound bath and know that it worked for you, right? That it felt good. And so now what we're seeing, and the proposed kind of mechanism for how it works is we do see that there's some brainwave entrainment to those tones, right? And those tones, it's putting out 432 hertz, 430 hertz. There's often a difference. So we get monotones and dual tones. And you've probably heard of the term binaural beats at this point. And I know I've gone over time, and I'm going to wrap it up in a second. Oh, and my slide should be up there. If you could share it, if you're not already sharing, sorry. So this is the point. You're not stuck. Your brain can change. And unfortunately, our environment is set up to kind of push us towards maladaptive plasticity, right? We're chronically stressed all the time. You have to find ways to regulate your nervous system. But again, what works for everyone might not work for you. So test it out, right? Where you put the spotlight matters. Your attention matters. we'll get back to binaural beats in a minute. So, why your attention matters, right? Where your attention goes, your energy flows. And that's very true, right? So, all of those neural networks that are signaling with each other and then telling your body to stay upright or lay down or do whatever, like all of that happens as a product of where your attention goes. And that doesn't have matter just with our external world. That's also important internally. So the brain, I said this earlier very briefly, but the brain does not know the difference between something that you are experiencing in reality in front of you right there versus what you're imagining, right? And so that means that if you are constantly stuck in a thought loop and you're thinking like, and you're replaying that argument in your head, or you're like, oh, did she not like my new haircut or whatever, it's something that just makes you feel bad, even if it's just a little icky. What you're doing is you're creating low grade changes in your body. And the more you do it, the more you're telling your brain that this is important. And it eventually learns that. And it does lay down neural tracks to come back to that as a place, right? So we kind of have to put the spotlight in the right place. The spotlight wants to go to the negative because of that negativity bias to try and keep us alive. But like I said, we're not running away from lions anymore. We're checking emails and phones and managing all the stuff with the kids and potentially caregiving. Like there's a whole bunch of other types of stressors that are happening that cause that same evolutionary response to kind of go off. But that response is to try and keep us safe. So it's going to harp on the negative. So you literally have to train your brain to do the positive. The good thing about the breath work and the yoga and the episodic future thinking, that's a technique that pro athletes use, is episodic future thinking. It's called EFT. It's essentially guided visualization. And it's basically they're just thinking about I'm gonna make that free throw or that sidestep I always miss. They now imagine themselves doing it correctly. And it turns out their performance goes up. They don't have as many stress related issues, right? And so do what pro athletes do. And you can do it. You don't even have to like out on the field. You could just the thing I like about sound baths is it reduces the energy barrier. It's super passive. It's a lot easier than meditation. And when it's guided, it kind of does all the work for you. So you really just get to bliss out essentially. Shadow shaped spotlight, right? What happens to our hormones, what happens inside of our body, our past, our even our past thoughts, right? That changes our perception and what we see. If we see negative, we're going to see more negative. You literally have to kind of train yourself to see the positive. And I know that's a very hard thing to do, especially right now. But that's why it's so important that you access like Kim's services. And for instance, I have a 360 sound bath coming up on Wednesday at the Birmingham Shambhala Center, if you'd want to go to that, where we have multiple sound bath artists kind of, playing at the same time. And I've come back to this point multiple times that resilience is a practice, not a preset. We are sort of born and trained to survive, and we really have to practice resilience. Every known chronic disease that we have is due to increased, has some inflammatory component, and we now know that there's these stress-induced illnesses that really play into that as well. So last point, I kind of dropped off on the brain entrainment. Binaural beats do work. They do entrain your brain waves. If anyone wanted to get very technical about it, you're more than welcome to look up the term frequency following response for anyone that wants to look into it. That's currently the proposed mechanism for how neural entrainment works when you listen to something like binaural beats, meaning you have slightly different frequencies going into each ear. And the cool thing about idiophonic instruments and the sound bath is that it naturally creates binaural beats for you. You have these different monotones hitting your ears at different frequencies, and your brain is in training to that. So, what is it in training to? We're going from gamma up here, we're learning something new right now. Our brain waves are in gamma, they're kind of high. In a sound bath, meditation, breath work, things like that we did earlier, that's actually going to bring your brainwave state down. And behaviorally, when we see it in the alpha theta range, that's when someone's really relaxed, kind of right before you take a nap, or if you're meditating, or if you're in a sound bath, right? And so we go down to this rest and digest brainwave state, this light meditation state, and that's where we see a lot of these positive brain effects happen, right? And so, like I said earlier, it's not just going to happen automatically. You do have to practice this stuff, but thank goodness we're right here in the heart of Birmingham, and you have plenty of opportunities to do that. If you want to learn more in a structured way about the brain rewired, because we've only talked about stress today, there's 5 other keystone areas in your life that you really need to pay attention to if you want to fall into this adaptive neuroplasticity pathway. So I'll be covering that on December 10th at Trim Tab Brewing. Only 24 hours, I've actually extended the early discount, the early bird discount. It will be over within 24 hours, so go ahead and get those if you need to. But if you want to learn more about rewiring specifically, you can learn it in that talk coming up. With
Thank
that, I apologize for going a little long, and I'm going to hand it back over for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. So yes, I wanted to open it up for questions. I don't see any yet. Um, but please, if you have a question, put it in. Oh, we've got something. Um, okay. So first I want to ask Kim. I have a question for Kim, and then I'll turn it to a question we have in the chat. Kim, will you just speak briefly about some of the work that you're doing in the area of scientific research?
Yeah, I appreciate everything that Dr. Smith said. And yes, there's lots of research. So your tax dollars are being used for lots of research purpose, that this is not just out in the realm of woo-woo and back into the realm of scientific research. So one of the projects that I'm currently working on is with Auburn, University of Auburn School of Nursing, where we're doing 12 weeks, 2 days a week. For 12 weeks, people are practicing yoga. We're doing that online. And we're spending an hour with each session, and it's for individuals who have heart failure and mild cognitive decline, because it was based on the replication of another study that was done that showed that that regular practice of yoga did reduce or reverse cognitive decline as well as issues with the heart. So we're currently in the middle of that study, as well as a study that was recently completed with UAB with support from AIM, that was with the ALS clinic that's here in Birmingham, working with folks who are diagnosed with ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And that was to do 6 weeks of yogic breathing with them. And ALS is a fatal, always fatal neurodegenerative disease where people lose control of movement, eventually die of, just being unable to breathe on their own. And so it was spent 6 weeks in study with breathing practices to show that improved, if it improved quality of life. And we did get indicators along two of the qualitative areas that showed that it had a very positive impact. It did improve aspects of their quality of life, and so it absolutely made a difference. So I absolutely support the statement that Dr. Smith made at the beginning of her presentation, which is this has moved out of woo-woo into research and science. There's lots of studies that are happening right now around surgeries that are being done with mechanical stimulation of the vagus nerve, having having implants put in. And so we can see the parallels between the work that we can do in yoga through breathing, tapping, other methods that can support that's moving into science.
Thank you so much, Kim. Okay, we've got some questions here. Well, first I will say for Dr. Smith and for Kim, if y'all would both take a moment and just in the chat, like if you could put, any like your website or any contact information, because we've got some questions around that. We do have people locally, and we also have people from other states as well on this Zoom. So maybe if you've got, I know a lot of it is in person, but if there are any virtual options to participate in either of your programs, that would be great. And so I'm going to get to Danielle's question. She says, what advice would you give to other sound practitioners supporting clients and participants through sound facilitation? So I think that's directed toward both of you.
I'm sorry, I was putting my Instagram in, which is the best place to reach me. Can you share that question one more time about sound practice?
Sure. So what would your advice be to other sound practitioners supporting clients and participants through sound facilitation?
My biggest piece of advice would be that the sound is nice to explore, and we see a lot of people bringing bowls and different instruments into yoga classes, using it as part of Shavasana and things like that. But find a really well respected program training that can give you a great foundation to understand sort of the science behind everything that's happening, contraindications, because there are contraindications about who should or should not necessarily participate in a sound bath. Things like, some of the things Dr. Smith mentioned, binaural beats. If it's recorded sound, it could do things like induce seizures, and I've actually seen that happen in a session. So it's just really important to have a great solid foundation from which you can begin to explore sharing sound in your community.
Thanks, Kim. Dr. Smith, any other comments there? And maybe also, I don't know, what if Danielle also meant, wanted to just about kind of self-care. I don't know, that could maybe not be part of it. But
Yeah, sorry, I'm just replying here to the potential books. So just to that question, I heard there was The Secret Chord by Daniel Levitin, neuroscientist, Music and Mind by Renee Fleming, famous opera, and Sound Medicine by Dr. Kulreet Chaudhry. That'll get you a good start. For recommendations on or advice for supporting clients, Kim's advice is grant, right? Like that's the biggest thing. Like it's not a blanket solution for everyone. And some people, if especially if you have certain brainwave activities, like if you're prone to epilepsy, like some of those frequencies don't usually, but it can, trip off an epileptic seizure. So you want to be really, really careful, right? That you are getting high quality sources of your sound, that you're fully trained. If you start to feel weird, like if you've had an epileptic seizure, you probably know what that feels like coming on. But just be aware of that, right? This is not a blanket solution for everyone, and make sure that you ask your clients before you go into that. I think another important part is building an environment, right? It's not just the sound, right? Like the sound is part of this larger kind of healing environment, or that we're trying to build for people, right? This supportive, whole body, whole mind environment. So just be really aware of the environment and the spacing, and the timing of it. If you feel free to reach out. Also, you're more than welcome. I don't know if you're local or far away, but I can try and send you kind of the formats that I like to use. Every sound bath artist is a little bit different because they were trained by different people. But I'm more than happy to kind of share those notes offline with you. If you'd like, just reach out to me at synapticharbor@gmail.com. Um, and
and
then is specific music skill needed to be impactful in these areas? Like for the person playing it or listening to it? I would say for the person playing it, being certified, right? Being certified as a sound healer, that's really important, right? We're dealing with what a lot of times are traumatic emotions that can come up. And it's really important that you don't rewire that even worse, right? It's important that you don't re-encode that during the sound bath as a worse experience, right? You can reinforce traumas and things like that. So, but as far as you being the one listening to it, no, you need absolutely the only skill you need is to determine whether or not it feels good for you or not. And then that's really it. So I don't know, Kim, do you have any recommendations on that? Are there specific music skills needed to be impactful in these areas?
No, I don't think so. I think that's one of the fears or anxieties, is that if you don't have a musical background, that you won't be able to be successful. And a lot of this, even though we do encourage the training, can still be very intuitive. So, once you kind of get that foundation, some of the things that I shared around notes and how they can impact energy centers and things like that, then it's just an exploration that is going to be different each time. And then I also wanted to say in closing, I know we're at time, that I appreciate the sort of diversity of people who are on the calls today. As I look at the participants, as I look at the different types of individuals and organizations, and just to encourage more wellness into all spaces, right? Because a lot of times we think corporate is something separate, or this area over here is something separate, and there's always an opportunity, as long as there are human.
mm, well, we have lost Kim for the moment. While we were, I know we are at time, but thank you so much for everybody for being here. Kim, we lost you for a moment. Just wrapping up, but please finish what you were saying.
I was just saying to bring wellness into every space. Corporate doesn't matter. Encourage and be an ambassador. I'm sorry I'm in the hospital here, so there's been a lot of activity. I'm in a treatment room and the Wi-Fi signal isn't great, but just be advocates and ambassadors for bringing this kind of wellness support into every space, that it's not something that's separate and apart, but to be integrated. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. And Lindsay, Dr. Smith, anything that you would like to leave us with as well?
Um, No, I think I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to leave you with one small new piece of information because I forgot to say it. But I agree with everything Kim says. Prioritize your wellness by all means necessary. Instead of the word damn, I say bam to myself, meaning by all means necessary. Protect your space, set boundaries, build resilience. Your life literally depends on it. So the last part I was going to point out was about the chakra centers. So if you've never integrated with the chakra systems before and it's too ethereal of a concept for you to grasp, each one is also associated with a major hormone gland in the body, which is involved in that neuroendocrine response we talked about at the very beginning. So if that helps you understand it more from a physiological standpoint to better understand what we mean when we're talking about chakra systems, then go that route. I just want to make it accessible for everyone because I know that sometimes when we start talking about energy work, like half the crowd's like, So yeah, we just really want to integrate the two. But other than that, by all means necessary, protect your space, protect your wellness, and do it often. So
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you. This was phenomenal. Thank you everyone who was here with us today. I do want to let you know that our next Virtual Mental Health Monday will be October 20th. We have Buffalo-based photojournalist and artist Brendan Bannon. And his topic is photography for expression and connection. And he'll share insights from his work facilitating storytelling through photography and highlighting how visual narratives can foster healing and connection. So, again, thank you so much for spending this hour and 4 minutes with us. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Lindsay. It was delightful being with y'all. Take care, everyone.
thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.